panel on the rise of anti-LGBTQI legislation and freedom of expression. We have a wonderful panel for you this morning about, I think, what is a very pressing and important issue also for not only for people interested in LGBTQI issues, but also people interested generally in freedom of expression. When we look around the world, I think we see in this field a peculiar mixture of hope and pessimism. In some countries there is clear improvement and change for the better, but in a lot of other places the politicization of LGBTQI issues and certain legislative developments that have followed from that have led to terrible setbacks and backlashes. Not in the least, for example, in Eastern Europe. In this panel, we're going to explore a little bit this state of affairs in various places around the world. And we're going to, in particular, have a look at 4 important places: Chile, Bosnia, Iran, and Uganda. That's where the people from this panel are from. And I'd like to introduce them very briefly to you, and then we'll immediately go into a discussion about the issues that they are concerned with. This is going to be more or less an informal talk about these various places and the implications of recent things that have been going on in these places. And we'll open it up in the second part of the time that we have here to a discussion with you, questions and answers, obviously, but also opinions or ideas that you might have from the places that you are coming from. And you know, it would be interesting to see what the important similarities are and what the important differences are, and how we can act upon that analysis to improve things. Okay, so to introduce these wonderful panel members, I'm starting here on your right side, our left side, with Beatrice Lamwaka from Uganda, Damir Arsenijevic from Bosnia, Babak zadeh from Iran, and finally Pablo Simonetti from Chile. And perhaps we can start with you, Pablo. If you could start with, say, just a few things about yourself and what exactly you do, what your connection is with the field of LGBT issues in Chile. And then we'll move on to the other ones to do the same.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you very much for being here. Thank you to the PEN International for inviting me to this wonderful conference. I'm a writer, I'm a fiction writer, and I just happen to be in the middle of political upheaval because the LGBTQI rights were postponed for such a long time in Chile, and political officials weren't taking any actions. So, given that I was a writer, I had a voice in the public sphere, so I just spoke up, and other people joined, and we formed an LGBTIQ NGO called Equals. And since then, we have been engaged in political issues dealing with the LGBTQI community. I was president for 2 years, and I'm happily a former president now because I was able to come back to write, and I published 2 books after being the president. So I hope we have a good conversation.
Yes, thank you very much. Maybe just a little question about the way you are organizing your activism with that group, with Equals. Was it sort of directed towards politicians, or was it more directed towards the general public debate about those issues, or maybe both?
Well, what happened first, it was just we had a very simple message to give to the public, which was like, you know, equal love, equal rights, and that was made through a public campaign, and we got a lot of attention from the media, and you know, right afterwards, we got a lot of attentions from the politicians that were worried about this subject. For example, like I was in a TV show one night. It was a political TV show because of the campaign that we've done also in TV with the help of some of the media. The media said, okay, I want this piece of advertising. It was an advertising. I want this campaign on my space. So they put it in. It had a lot of impact. And then we were invited to the political show. And the next day, most of the parties that wanted to be involved in a way with the LGBTQI community invited us to general meetings or to the Congress. And 2 weeks later, before we had the name, because this was like something like an outburst, you know, something that it happened because the society was mature for that. The church has lost its power, the Catholic Church has lost its power because of sexual abuse scandals, and the right opened up a little bit to this issue, so it wasn't anymore a political issue in the sense that it wasn't, as it happens in other countries, which is a left flag, you know. This is something that belongs to either the left or either the right. So in that sense, we were talking to an open public, and the idea of the campaign, it was inclusion instead of resistance. Okay. I'm saying this because of the name of this conference, because like inclusion. And that's because we were ready as a society for that step, you know. So we could talk in a more to be collaborative, is to participate of the political conversation, and to propose ways and ideas, and so that's why we got into the political conversation, and since then we have got these two legs, you know. One is talking to a general public, and the other one is going into the Congress.
Okay, very good. So we're going to go later in the panel into concrete strategies and obviously awareness raising, and then through that reaching the political level is obviously something which we could think about and discuss also in other cases. Okay, I want to ask you the same question, Babak. So, who are you and how are you related to the field that we're discussing here?
Yes, I am Babak. I'm from Iran, and mostly I was working on queer theory.
Mm-hmm.
We had some magazines, and all of them were underground because we could not appear in public by our writings there. And our magazines was, for example, I was the chief editor of Mind Motor magazine, which was involved in queer theory, literature, and art theory.
Mm-hmm.
But specifically, we had another group called Iranian Sexual Studies Group, and we did some researches on the question of sexuality in Iran. From 2011, we organized the group when we were inside Iran, and we didn't use our own name. There was some fake names, and we chose the name of the people who were killed because of their sexual orientation, and we used those names instead of our own name.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And after we escaped from Iran with my colleagues, we tried to reorganize the group and continue it. Also, I was doing some performance arts or stories and poems, And I translated articles and books by Judith Butler, for example, or Monique Wittig, the French lesbianist, and lots of other things.
Yeah. So you're approaching it partly from an academic standpoint, let's say?
We can name it as academic.
Yeah. But I'm also interested in when you say we continue or try to continue our activities with the same people who are outside Iran right now. Do you still try to reach an audience in Iran? And if so, how do you try to do that?
Of course, because the thing, my country or the language, my native language is my destiny, so I should write in my own language. But I will try to find some English audience or some English magazines maybe in the future.
Yeah, okay. All right, we'll come back to that in a minute. Then Damir Arsenijevic from Bosnia, same question for you.
Thank you, Peter. Good afternoon, everybody. Well, my particular strategy, I'm an academic and an activist, and what I'm trying to do is work in public spaces to ensure visibility, but also to detect the points of conflict that arise whenever LGBTIQ themes and questions arise, because the context of Bosnia and Herzegovina is one in which being branded gay or lesbian is worse than being branded a war criminal. So for me the question is, and for us who live there, is what does that mean? What kind of society that is that takes pride in war criminals, and it actually blackens and kind of shies away from dissident sexualities, to call them like that. So also I think it's very important at this point, Bosnia having been through the war, and political elites that led the war and got rich through the war and through genocide are still in power, and the international community doing democratization in Bosnia and Herzegovina with these political elites is a very tricky business. So the question is, how do you go beyond this nominal legislation that exists, but actually in practice there is very little evidence of that being effective. And also another point is how you don't give up on public institutions and create spaces in public institutions.
Yeah. Can you say something about this creation of public spaces where you personally do?
Well, particularly
things,
at
exactly
university, I think it's very important for me to create spaces in the curricula. It's very important to move beyond academic disciplines, but also to open up through arts and literature ways and to speak about inequality, and I think that's the question.
So you mean also speaking with students about these topics, for example?
But also speaking with neighborhoods, speaking with communities, and opening up these kind of spaces in everyday life.
Yeah, and do you have an organization that is doing that?
We partly work through various organizations. I mean, I'm lucky to have some of my students who graduated and who set up their own NGOs, and they're doing great work, so it's kind of making these kind of connections, but also creating the wider platform for solidarities with feminist movements, with workers' movements, to open up a wider debate of freedom and equality.
Right, okay. Yeah, thank you. And then, last but not least, Beatrice, Uganda, what exactly are you doing with regard to the topic there?
I'm a writer, and I've written about issues of LGBTIQ. And as a writer, I'm a member of a women writers organization called Vermeersch. And unfortunately, the organization makes sure that we don't write things that will put the organization in trouble. I remember one time we had a public reading, and the director was like, "Oh, people, just make sure that you read about things that will not put us in trouble," and of course that's in reference to issues of LGBTI. And but I've also mentored some writers who have written on the issues, and incidentally, some of the stories were published in the newspapers, and it wasn't trouble.
It wasn't any trouble to publish any of it.
Yeah, but that, because it was under the WiPC mentorship program, and the stories were published. We thought maybe even the newspaper wouldn't allow that, but they did, and the public never noticed. Maybe they understand what that means for an individual, and yet and when you turn things around, then they're like pointing fingers. I think maybe.
Yeah. So that's quite interesting. There seems to be a difference between what officially is going on and what people can actually do in terms of writing about certain issues, and then publishing even about certain things without getting in trouble. That's what you're saying, right?
Yes, that's true. There are a number of writers also writing on the same issue, and actually one of the writers won a prize the K Prize for African Writing, and there was a globe, it's written about it globally, and it's all like something like homosexual story wins the K Prize, and nothing.
Right,
happened.
interesting.
Yeah.
So this actually brings me to a question I want to ask the other panel members as well. In your countries, let's say, do you think that things are getting worse at this moment? Are there important developments where you would say these are things that are alarming at this point? Or are you also seeing a trend towards improvement? I was talking in the introduction about a mixture of hope and pessimism. I wonder, in all of the places that you are coming from and writing about, do you experience hope, or do you experience rather the pessimism? I don't know who wants to go into that first.
In our country, we are during this last 5 years, we are experiencing a lot of hope. We have passed an anti-discrimination law, which specifically names sexual orientation and gender identity as protected categories, and that's very important because it gives legal entitlement to your identity.
Was that something? Sorry to interrupt you. But was that something you specifically with your organization also worked on?
We did work into that, and we got involved really strongly into that law. I remember chasing the senators through the Congress, like trying to get them to sign a piece of paper to defend the gender identity as one of the protected categories, because the first negotiation was, okay, let's put sexual orientation, but let's leave out gender identity, and for us that was unacceptable.
Yeah.
But that law is still very insufficient, because it's just like, it's quite symbolic. It's a legal it's a legal way that you can say this person or this organization or this institution from the government has been discriminative with me, but it's hard to prove always, because discrimination is a very obliquous way. It has a very obliquous way to work, and but it has gotten a very important influence in the we're a legal country, I would say that. The laws influence a lot, like the way people think.
Yeah, change the mindsets of people,
yeah.
also through a legislative change. Yeah.
So people say now that you cannot discriminate me, and that's a point where we weren't at that point before the law, which it was passed after a very terrible and tragic event, which was the death of Daniel Zamudio, that he was beaten in a park and tortured for many hours, and then a month later he died, and that had a strong impression in the whole public, and there was, you know, the whole society, even the parties that you say that were considered conservative, voted in favor of this law, with a lot of, you know, tricks in the middle, so that it wouldn't go too far. So what we're trying to do now in respect to anti-discrimination is to go from formal equality to transforming equality. So how okay, we see each other as equals, but that's still legal, and we need to influence more into the culture. So in that part, in the cultural part, it's harder because at the educational level, it's for example, 2 weeks ago, and a transgender kid, she wasn't allowed to keep going to class because she wanted to start to be called as a woman. You know, she's 6 years old. It's an amazing case. Her parents support her in a very strong way, but the school said, you know, you cannot have this. You cannot bring her dressing as a woman. We're going to keep calling her Baltasar and not Andy. She wanted to be called Andy. So that issue is still ongoing. For that, we are trying to create an institution in the state, in the executive power, that could work the policies through the whole, you know, state apparatus. So we could have a change in all the services, especially in the educational ministry, which is that's the hardest part, because education is being done mostly by the Catholic Church, the Evangelical Church, and they keep, you know, educating boys and girls in the idea that sexuality, homosexuality, it's a psychological sickness.
So it seems that you managed to change legislation and so on, but then there's a certain order. You know, you change the legislation, but then the social work, the social reality, influencing the social reality begins only. Yeah.
We have just passed the civil union law in Chile. It's a very good civil union. It's a world-class civil union. The only thing that it doesn't have is adoption, because that's the issue. You know, it recognizes that you are someone to the other person. You're going to have a civil status. You're going to be called legal, I don't know, conviviente, legal partner. You know, so I'm going to be the legal partner of the person who I live with and who I love, and that's very important because it puts you in a position that you are someone in the life of the person that you love. You can take decisions, you can, you know, share your patrimony and so on, so the inheritance and stuff like that. So we have the civil union, we have the anti-discrimination law, but we have in front equal marriage, this anti-discrimination. I think this is very important. I think this is the most important issue that we have in front, to have a very good institution that works anti-discrimination in all the senses. In Chile we have multiple types of discrimination, racial discrimination, class discrimination, and of course LGBTQI discrimination. And so we're trying to work it from a very open mind. It's totally open to different types of cultural discriminations that we have. Because like when you keep, I mean, you go into a Mapuche woman and that she's also lesbian, you know, the multi-discrimination works in a really bad way. I mean, poverty comes right after that. And the last piece that we are trying to pass it this year, and we have the commitment of the government to do it, is the transgender the gender identity law, which is very important for like transgender community in Chile is quite small. It should be like 1,000 people, but their situation is just so urgent it needs relief very soon and fast, because they are in a position that they cannot go to school, they cannot have a job, and they generally end up in situations of poverty and prostitution.
Okay, that's interesting. So the legislative developments are quite positive, but then the social realities might be still troublesome. How does that compare to the other places? I don't know, Damir, maybe do you want to say something first? Or,
sure. Well, absolutely. I think what we are seeing in Bosnia is exactly the same thing. We have pieces of legislation passed. You know, political parties are forced by the so-called international community to pass these laws in which anti-discrimination, now hate speech, and all of that exists on paper. You know, Bosnia has probably one of the best mechanisms enshrined in the constitutions that European Convention of Human Rights is directly applicable. But the problem is nobody has applied it, ever. So you can have, you know, what are the lessons? You know, we've lived in this context of people who led the war, who are still in power, but now presenting themselves to be in a different guise. Yep. You know, now they're just, you know, they exchange their uniforms for nice suits instead of the, you know, I don't know, little towns. They're now going to Brussels and they're trying to pretend that all of it is, you know, okay now. So the question is, how is it not okay?
Yeah,
you know,
but it makes it quite challenging, it seems, for activists and people who want to raise awareness. Absolutely. Because everyone can always say, well, on paper everything's in order, so there's no need to be alarmist about it.
Well, I mean, the question is, the violence is on the rise, and that's what we are witnessing. There are deep divisions in terms of the capital and periphery. People are leaving. Poverty. They live in abject poverty. I mean, poverty in Bosnia is estimated to be at around 56%. Youth unemployment figures I'm now giving. Youth unemployment for under 30 is 75%.
Right.
So, you know, it's in these kind of economic indicators, the whole situation is catastrophe. So, again, the context of all countries of former Yugoslavia is pushed towards far right. We have rehabilitations of Quisling regimes. Now that fascism is okay nominally, and I think that in the future we'll see a greater struggle. So the question is, how do you move within the legalistic framework to push the struggle as far as you can go, and to find the points of grit and to find the points of conflict, but also how do you nourish and sustain people who just haven't got anywhere to go. But so I think the challenge is that how do we move beyond this kind of fascination with very particularist identity, and how do you create the wider basis for not being treated as an exotic species for being gay or lesbian or transgender, but really how that predicament and systemic inequality actually works for you to create the solidarity with a worker, with a single mother, with a war veteran perhaps. How do you create these very unlikely alliances and fight jointly against impunity? Yesterday we talked about impunity. I think impunity should be widened and rethought in a much more creative way, and the struggle against to end impunity.
Yeah, very interesting. How does that compare to Iran and recent developments you observing there, Babak?
Yes, I was listening to others' story, and as I found that we are considering a way through future, that in this way all of us are somewhere. For example, in Chile we are trying to be more equal and be against the discrimination in the culture against LGBT people. If you consider Iran in this way, we are back, because we cannot have any LGBT organization as a legal thing in the streets. Or, for example, I was a criminal in Iran, as the government considered me. So I couldn't be a LGBT activist in an office with a rainbow, for example. I was a criminal, like a robber or a Jew or like this.
Talking about public spaces, there is no public space where you can express, you know, anything related to your identity there.
So in this direction, we can consider that in Iran, we will have a legal recognition. If you want to see yourself in the direction, there's a resistance in society to, from the civil society, to make the government and people to understand the sexual orientation, that lesbian and gay people are not criminal, they are normal people like us, or they are something natural, they are not sick, or they are not something like this. And they try to show to the society that we are not dangerous. But I felt myself dangerous to society. So I don't want to show to society that I'm a cool person, or I can be a... For example, in West, I see that we have a homosexual president, or homosexual bankers, or something like this. The way I lived in Iran as a homosexual was different from this. I was thinking of homosexuality not as a relation I want, something happening in bed, in my personal life, and society should recognize my personal life. I was thinking of homosexuality as a new relation that could define life. It was another kind of life, another kind of relation between things and bodies. So my research direction goes through how we can have a non-heteronormative theory or non-heteronormative language.
So, but is this something you can communicate with other people in Iran, or is even there is even that troublesome and difficult?
You mean communicate with other people as a homosexual?
Yeah, sure.
Of course not.
The world of underground activism. Basically, my question is, how underground is underground? When you said you have an underground magazine,
you have
how do you do that? How do you survive in a context that is so?
I didn't survive. I just lived there.
Yeah, you had to escape.
And secretly, and then I found that they don't let me to educate in university. So I found that I have no other place in society. And, as a citizen, you mentioned in the West, as a citizen, I was not existing there.
Yeah.
I was just writing in my room or communicating to the students in the university. Some of them read my writings. But with the people are totally homophobic. So my connection to people was something like they tell me bad words, or sometimes I fight with them like a real criminal, or something like this. When you, from here you see Middle East, it's a total misunderstanding about how we understand homosexuality inside a country like Iran. Of course, let me talk from other direction. We have a bipolar machine. It has two parts. One part, we homosexuals in Middle East are living in this global machine. One part of this global machine, which is our own country, it makes us like Satan. For example, in Iran, the government say homosexuality is a kind of Satanism or like this. At the same time, when I experienced exile and come out of my country, I found that no, they're seeing me like a victim. So there is a two-polar machine that we are living in it.
Yeah, you're either the victim or you're either the evil, basically. Yeah.
At the same time, you see that, for example, when you are talking about Middle East, you should be concerned about the problem of colonialism. For example, let's go to the Middle East direction. We are going there, and at the first place we see Israel and Palestine situation. And then we can pass to Iran. Or at the Middle East, Iraq, which the ISIS is killing homosexuals from the bottom of a building. They fall them down and they die there. So let's start with the Palestine and Israel. Israel claimed that we accept Palestinian homosexual refugees to have a safe life inside Israel. But we do not recognize their nationality as a Palestinian. So it's a complicated situation that when you see globally, you will see that unfortunately the LGBT problem is becoming like a foreign policy of Western government toward the Eastern government. So if you want to see me what's in the future, I will tell you if this foreign policy of Western communities could impose on a country like Iran, we can see that all these Islamic governments are becoming cool and they recognize homosexuality as a normal thing in their own country. If you want me to say that future is like this, yeah, why not? For example, consider 30 years later, and we will see mullahs who are laughing and say hello to a homosexual guy. But I didn't see homosexuality and non-heteronormative community as to have a homosexual banker or homosexual president. But what's going on in the society is the relation of market only. So, as Paul said, of course, we could have legal and formal recognition, but to reach equality in the death of country or society, it's a long period.
It's an enormous step for a place like Iran. Yeah. Okay, so Uganda, what can we say about recent developments there, Beatrice?
Although the LGBT law has been annulled, there are attempts of trying to get it back into parliament, but I'm so sure that it won't go through because of the impact that it had. So many donors pulled out of Uganda, and so the negative impact, I don't think it will go through parliament. We've also we don't have spaces where you can talk about issues of LGBTI, not in the media, even radio stations. I guess if you tried, it could be closed down. Because also we have other laws that, we have so many laws that prohibit, affects freedom of expression. Even the Public Order Management Act cannot you can't just meet and discuss issues, whether political or any other issues. And then we also have the pornography law, where you can't write things that feel pornographic. Or I know that when the law had just been signed, people were undressing women on the streets for wearing short skirts and things like that. So we have laws that really, you just have to be careful, because any of them can be pulled against you for doing anything.
Yeah. So it's interesting. What we're seeing here in these 4 places, that in Duke, in Bosnia, and in Chile, we have legislation that is quite acceptable and quite good, but then the mindsets are really, and the social realities are really very difficult to address, and there's a challenge there. And in these other 2 cases, even though the law, the legal framework within which we work is very narrow. So in the Ugandan case, a number of laws that directly are a threat to expression of LGBT issues.
Yeah, that's true. And but at least there are some there's some organizations that cater for the needs of LGBTI people, and especially now that is into health.
Yeah, is that related to freedom of expression as well, or is it more sort of self-help?
Self-help, more into that.
Yeah.
Not. Even the president was quoted one time saying, if you're gay, don't go around showing it around that, I'm gay, see me here. So it's more like, okay, you be gay, but don't show us. Just be somewhere else, not in the public sphere.
Now, I want to ask you the question, as writers, what exactly, in these various, circumstances, if these circumstances are defined by the legal frameworks that are not in place, or by the social realities mainly that are still a challenge, what can you do, and what are you doing that you think as a writer can be helpful towards pushing things in another direction? I don't know who wants to go into that first. Paolo,
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I don't know if we have to keep the order.
No, we don't.
Okay. In writing in Chile, we had two stages. In the 90s, we have resistance writers. For example, last night I was talking about this guy, Juan Pablo Sadana. He published a book about cruising on the streets in Chile, LGBTQI cruising. And it was a big scandal on the media because it had funding from the government. And I would say like the book was daring, so I really admire the representation. You say we are here. We are meeting in anonymous sex places. And then we had Pedro Lemebel, which is a well-known writer. He's a kind of a post-feminist writer. He's always like putting into question the gender identity idea. He was always playing with his identity, like dressing as a woman, half man, and he put together parody and popular culture together with this gender identity and LGBTQI situation. And it was very strong into that. I myself, for example, I wrote a short story about a married guy that he would go into Santa Lucia's hill, which is Santa Lucia's hill is where Santiago was founded. So it's very expressing of our identity. He goes into the Santa Lucia's Hill to have anonymous sex. So the expression before, it was just like, there were this like resistance in the writing. But then in the 2000 decade and this decade also, given that the society has shifted into a more tolerant idea of LGBTQI, the writing has become more as you know, telling stories that you say, you know, we belong, we are like you know. It's like, for example, I wrote this novel, the one I gave to you, Madre que está sobre los cielos, and people would read that and say, oh, you know, gay men have like family relationships as, you know, as the same as heterosexual ones. I say, well, that's, you know, a matter of course. And then the same with sexual relationships and love relationships. So like what's going on now is just like, you know, LGBTQI's expression is more from the day-to-day life and from the intimacy of their relationships. Still always with a little bit of an edge because of the discrimination, which is still ongoing. But that would be, I would say, that's the little short story of LGBTQ. Another thing happened. It was not anymore just expression of certain writers like telling LGBTQI stories, but also different expressions of that. For example, we had one writer, Oscar Contado, he wrote a gay history of Chile. And that had a huge impact, because like sometimes because as I was hearing you guys, it's like the way that we approach LGBTQI issues, it has a lot to do with our history, where we come from, the colonialism and the war, and you know, and the histories in Uganda. It influences a lot how, you know, get into the LGBTQI situation. So he wrote it, and there was some great findings. For example, homophobia came from Europe, from Spain. Like Mapuche people wasn't homophobic. It turned homophobic afterwards because of the Spanish influence. They had these transgender priests, and they were like you know, the center of the tribe. So
but that's interesting. So you're sort of telling these sort of unknown parts of the history in order to raise people's awareness and make them